Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Vet Chats, where we help veterans share their awesome stories and help make the veteran community a better place. Stay tuned to hear how the new generation is continuing their service. Also, Vet Chats is now available on Reese Across America Radio. We will be played Mondays at 9 p.m. and Saturdays at 3 p.m. They have a ton of great veteran-related content that I know you'll appreciate, so be sure to check them out on the Odyssey app, iHeartRadio, and at their website. Tonight we have a very cool guest. Her name is Leah Letson. She's currently on recruiting duty for the Air National Guard, and she is also a retired UFC fighter, and she's from Wisconsin, so we have a lot to talk about. Let's get her on. I see she just joined. All right.
Hi,
Hello. Hi, Leah. How are you doing this evening?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing good. How was your weekend?
Uh, uh, Pretty good. I actually spent the weekend volunteering on base with the Boy Scouts and Girl
Oh,
Scouts.
that's wonderful. What were they
Yeah.
doing?
They were getting, I think the Boy Scouts were getting their aviation badges, and then the Girl Scouts were getting their cybersecurity badges. So we were helping them out and escorting them around base and showing them all the cool stuff we do.
Oh, that's really awesome. I was
Yeah.
a Girl Scout back in the day, so I would have totally appreciated that. How has the weather been in Wisconsin?
Um, Kind of bipolar, honestly. It was 80 and sunny yesterday, and I was on my motorcycle, and then right now it is snowing. So,
Oh my
yeah,
My goodness, April is such a funny month. It can go either way, really. I remember
yeah,
we'd have track meets in April, and it was always such a gamble if we were able to do them because the track would be covered with snow.
yeah.
But
April's always like an iffy month in Wisconsin, so yeah.
it really is. So speaking of that, how was growing up in Wisconsin for you?
Um, I loved it. I mean, I've always been much more of a summer person, but I grew up in a smaller town than Milwaukee. I grew up in Janesville, so it was kind of a medium-sized city, I guess, for Wisconsin standards. Is like 60,000 people, so it was a decent size, but it wasn't quite like the metropolitan feel of Milwaukee. So
Ah, and Janesville is also where they process a lot of the VA claims. Do a lot of people
yeah.
work there in that town, or is it like a big
Um,
thing?
no, it wasn't. So when I was growing up, it was a lot of blue collar. Like we had the GM plant was like the main source of our economy, and then all the vehicle manufacturers and stuff that supported the GM plant were big industry in Janesville. And then they closed the GM plant, and that kind of ruined the economy for most of my high school years. So yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
that happens. I mean, a paper mill close in our town, and I feel like so many of those towns, like the more north you go, the more they're kind of hurting for that,
yeah,
um, for those type
definitely.
of jobs. So anyhow, you ended up going to college, and then you decided to join the Air Guard, correct?
Yes,
And
yes.
what was kind of behind that decision to do that?
I always liked the idea of serving my country and being a part of something bigger than myself. And then my grandpa was in all three branches of the military except the Air Force. So he was in the Marines, Army, and Navy. And my mom, I never actually got to meet my grandpa because he died before I was born, but my mom always talked highly about him, and I just admired his service and sacrifice that he gave for the country. So and the other factor to that is originally I wanted to be a police officer, and I know that you get preference points if you're in the military and you become a police officer. So that was the other driving force behind it.
Yes, yeah. Yeah, a lot of people get out and go into the police force. That's also, did you want to be more of like military police when you went in? Or what kind of
Um,
job were you looking for?
no, no, actually, so I saw the cool like Air Force commercials, like all the science fiction type stuff, and then I was like, I want to do something a little bit different on the military side versus the civilian side. just to keep things interesting. So originally I went into operations, command and control. So if you don't know what that is, it's like kind of air traffic control, but air traffic control takes planes off and lands them, and then we did all of the controlling of the airspace in between the takeoff and landing. So like the air-to-air, air-to-ground combat type stuff.
Okay, gotcha. So if
Yeah.
anyone's Navy watching, I think that would be like the what they do in like CATSI or the what the OSs do, I believe.
Okay.
So that's really cool. And what was it like going to school while also doing that? And not even to mention you were also training a lot as well, right?
Yeah. So time management was like my number one priority in life. Like I got really good at managing my time and getting a lot done in a short period of time. Basically, I'd go to class and then I would take my homework to the gym and study in between workouts at the gym, and then I'd get home, stay up late writing papers, and then I would make sure that I made it to drill weekends. And then in operations, you have a test that you have to take once a month, just to make sure that you stay sharp on your skills and make sure you're up to date on procedures and things. So I also had to study for that before drill weekends. And then yeah, basically it was very stressful, but it was very rewarding because there's a sense of accomplishment when you can do all three of those things at one time.
Yeah, without a doubt. And what point in your fighting career were you at when you joined?
Um, I was actually just starting to discover MMA when I joined the military. So I actually took cardio kickboxing in college to get in shape for Air Force basic training. And then um, the instructors for that own their own MMA gym, and they invited me down to try jiu-jitsu and MMA, and I fell in love with it right away. So as soon as I got back from boot camp and my tech school, I started training with the fight team, and then a month and a half later, on 24-hour notice, I had my first amateur fight, and I won by TKO.
Oh,
So, yeah, I was like, yep, this is definitely what I want to do.
yeah, I bet that was so validating. You're like, this
Yep.
is it. That's really
Yeah.
cool. So what was boot camp in comparison to your training? Was that just like almost a joke to you?
Uh, yes and no. So I'd say the physical aspect of it was a complete joke to me. I was in such good shape because fighting is like a different kind of shape. Like it takes your whole body, and like it is the most intense training that you could possibly think of, besides like special forces, obviously. But the physical aspect of basic training was pretty easy for me. And the mental aspect was a little bit more challenging for me just because I was used to having coaches and MMA instructors yelling at me and while I'm doing stuff, and it didn't really bother me. But seeing other people get flustered and then screw up and then the whole team pays for it, that was kind of what
Yeah.
was frustrating for me. Um, and eventually they got used to it and everything, but I think the whole like working as a team was more difficult for me just because I was so used to individual sports growing up. I
Mhm.
did karate, taekwondo, and then swim, and those are all, I mean, you have like a team with you, but it's mostly an individual sport, so learning to work as a team was probably the most challenging thing for me.
Yes, yeah, and probably frustrating, especially when you know you can have all your ducks in a row, you're performing at your best, and then if someone else is messing up or slacking off, it's
Yeah.
like, ah,
Yeah, that
I,
was the worst part for me, was getting frustrated because I was getting punished for other people doing things wrong. And so I remember just trying to give them pep talks when the MTI wasn't around, like just ignore the fact that they're yelling and screaming at you and just listen to what they're saying and then follow the instructions, and then you'll be okay, I promise.
yeah, yeah, it's almost like so many people get caught up with it, just like the shock of that they're being yelled at. They just like tune everything else out.
Yeah, yeah. You just gotta stay calm under pressure. So, yeah.
Yes. Yeah, and I'm sure your training really helped you with that beforehand. So when you got back, what was kind of like your relationship with the Air Guard? Were you, going the weekend a month and in the summer, or did you end up deploying?
So for a while, I'd say I think the first 4 or 5 years we didn't deploy. No, the first 4 years we didn't deploy. So I was just doing the one weekend a month and then 15 days a year. And then in 2017 is when I deployed, and that was my first deployment. And we went for, it was about 6.5 months-ish total. And that was really difficult for me. Being an MMA fighter and stepping away for that long, people don't realize like how much ring rust you get when you take that much of a break. I mean, it's pretty hard to come back from that. So I'd say coming back from deployment was probably the hardest thing I've ever done because I had to get back in fight shape, which was difficult to do, and then just the mental part of it of like you were just in such close quarters with people that you considered like family because you're over there with just a small group of people, and then when you come home, especially in the Guard, people go back to all over the world. So you were just working with people, they became like family, and then you get sent home, and then you're just like alone. Well, you kind of feel alone. You're not actually alone, but you feel alone because everyone else went back to their home state or home country, and you just kind of, that was probably the worst part for me, was coming back and just kind of feeling that like, oh, I miss my family, like that loneliness that people don't really talk about.
Yeah, that's so true because when you're on active duty, you'll deploy and then you come back and you're usually still working with those people for at least until you rotate again. So that's
Yeah.
really interesting to see that. And it's almost like you don't have anyone to decompress with or relate to. I'm
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm also curious because when you're on deployment, you're not in control of a lot, especially what you can eat. I mean, there's limited options and how long you can train for. So how did you manage that, trying to stay in shape?
So I think there was actually decent options. Like they had a salad bar and stuff. So like being on an Air Force base kind
Air
of
Force,
helps. 'Cause
yeah.
yeah. So I mean, it wasn't horrible. As long as you're diligent with your food choices, you can usually make some decent choices over there. And I was lucky enough to go to a base that already had established a jiu-jitsu club. And then as soon as I got there, they were really excited. They got wind that I arrived there, and they're like,
I
"Hey,
bet.
do you want to run this jiu-jitsu club?" And I was like, "Sure." So I kind of got lucky, and I already had people to train with as far as jiu-jitsu goes. And then so I was teaching, I believe 2 nights a week on base, 2 or 3 nights a week on base, and then I had an Australian friend who did Muay Thai, and so we held pads for each other and we worked out together several nights a week. So I got to stay in decent shape. It's still not the
Yeah.
same, but it's better than nothing.
Yeah, really. Wow, that worked out good that they
Yeah,
had that all
yeah.
set up. And were you able to get like that, like would that count towards your eval as, being like a fitness leader or anything, or they would kind of let you do that instead of, maybe standing a watch or, doing extra hours on your job?
So I was just expected to do that. Like, I chose to volunteer to do that basically on my own
Oh,
time, my own free time. So we were working 6/12s while we were over there, so 6 12-hour days. And then outside of that, we could pretty much do what we wanted on base. So that's what I chose to do with my free time, I guess. So
oh,
didn't
that's
really impact my job very much, but it was something I could add to my EPR. I don't know what other branches have EPRs, but enlisted performance reports, I guess, is what
okay.
we call them. So.
Gotcha. Yeah, yeah. I mean, I bet you that looks good when you're going up. And so when you came back, was it kind of, what was that? I know you kind of mentioned some of those tough part. What was the toughest part about getting back into like the MMA mode?
Um, just because like your mindset's totally different overseas versus like being stateside and training and stuff. So like getting back into that same mindset of like training all day every day and like focusing on MMA all day every day instead of focusing on the mission and the Air Force stuff that I was used to focusing on. And then I guess being around people that didn't really understand what I had just went through,
Mm,
that was probably the hardest part. I felt like I couldn't really relate to any of my friends or even my family much anymore, just because like I felt like I had just done this big thing and like it was a big accomplishment for me. And then once you get back stateside, like there's like a little celebration and then everyone's like, okay, back to normal life. And you're like, well, wait, it doesn't feel normal to me anymore, you know? So like that transition part was probably the hardest for me.
yeah, that's really because you have a whole new perspective. You come home with a whole unique outlook on life. And
Yeah.
what were kind of those frustrating things? Did you think that people are like, was it kind of like, oh, this like Americans take things for granted, or
Yeah.
just kind of like, um,
I remember like because I feel like I like at that point I was like I made this huge sacrifice in my like civilian career and everything to go do this big thing for this country, and then like I went to Walmart and like people are rude and like they cut you off and I'm like, man, I just like sacrificed 6 months of my life for you guys. You don't even appreciate it. That kind of mentality that you have to like get over. And then I also had a few people close to me who were prior service in different branches, and they're like, oh, you're just Air Force, what you did didn't matter at all, and like they just kind of diminished the deployment. And for me it was like that just hurt a lot because it's like I felt like I did something important and then I just kind of got like, you know, it was like diminished, you know. So
and that's
yeah.
such a shame because no matter what you did, somebody's gonna downplay it because,
Yeah.
but really, you're sacrificing so much. You're especially as someone in the guard because you're taking away from your normal day-to-day life, whether you're going to school, and also you're taking a huge chunk of training out as well.
Yeah.
So that really
I basically
upsets.
took a whole year off of my fight career to what it do the deployment, and then like I don't know, when people downplayed it when I first got back, I took it really personally. Now it doesn't bother me, but at the time it really bothered me.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, even with my deployment, I've had people like, oh, well, they used to be this long. And I'm like, did it suck any less? I mean, I'm sure it was
Yeah.
still, you know,
Yeah. Yeah.
it still sucked. That doesn't make me feel better. It makes me feel
Right.
worse.
Yeah, exactly.
But so kind of like comparing those two worlds with the MMA and then, being in the Air Force. What was it like being a woman in both of those? Did any help the other, or comparing and contrasting them?
I'd say being a female in the MMA sport was actually way harder than in the military because the military's come a long way, at least in the career fields and well the bases I was at. But I'd say being a female in the sport of mixed martial arts and at the gym, I felt like I had a chip on my shoulder because I was constantly being underestimated by guys, and I felt like I had to work 10 times harder just to get like half of the respect that the guys would just by walking in the gym. So I would get like eye rolls when someone new would come into the gym and they'd have to be partners with me. They would like roll their eyes like it was a waste of their time, and then I would show them, and then they would either quit because their ego couldn't handle it, which
Yep.
that's not my problem, and then or they would get really really angry and then try to like actually hurt me. So like I felt like I was always constantly frustrated, like trying to have to prove myself, and prove my worth and my deserving to be there. So it definitely put a chip on my shoulder, being a female and basically an all-male sport at the time. And more females came later on, but for the first several years, I was usually the only female in the gym. And for a while, I was like the only female on the fight team. So I definitely felt like I had to work way harder just to get some respect.
Yeah, absolutely. And were there any like female fighters that came before you that you looked up to, or you know, it's just starting to be more and more women are joining or doing this.
It was like pretty new that they had let, like, I think it was 2012 when they let Ronda Rousey into the UFC, and I had started in 2012 in the sport. So at the time, it was pretty new to me. The sport was new to me because I had never really watched MMA before doing MMA, and women in MMA it was heard of, but like it was pretty rare, and it wasn't as popular as it is now.
Mm-hmm.
So I felt like I didn't really have necessarily a role model or someone to look up to, but I felt like I wanted to be that role model that other girls could look up to. So that was my goal from very early on, was to be that role model and to show other girls like, hey, you can do this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're really paving the path. And
Yeah.
that's tough because I bet you there were so many moments where, you know, maybe you get that comment or you get that something and it's just like, did you ever question, like, why am I doing this?
Constantly. Yeah. I was like, is it even worth it? Like, are they ever going to respect me? I had a lot of those moments, and then I was just like, you know what? I'm going to keep pushing through, and I'm a very determined person, so when I set my mind to something, I'm going to accomplish it. So there were moments where I was like, man, is it even worth it? Like, they're never going to give me the same respect, but I was like, you know what? Just keep working harder and prove them wrong. And that was kind of what motivated me, was proving people wrong and proving them that I can do it and other women can also do it, and we deserve the same respect that men get.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. I could see that. I watched a few of your clips and I was just like, I want to know what like lights her fire. What is she thinking
Yeah.
of when she's punching or when she's just like, you know, doing the I don't know the name of the moves, but I could see it. So is that it? Is that what's going through your head a lot of time when you're in the
Yeah.
ring?
Yeah, I feel like I gotta prove people wrong that underestimated me and other women in the sport, and um, that is really what motivates me. Is like, tell me I can't do something, I'm like, yeah, okay, and then I'm gonna go do it. So that being underestimated really definitely motivated me.
Hell yeah. Yeah, that's cool. And you proved it. You definitely proved it. I mean, performing at one of the highest levels. I'm kind of curious, what was your relationship like with your coaches or your trainers? Were they ever one of those people in your head?
Unfortunately, yes. So um, my coaches for a while, I mean, I really, really looked up to them at the time, but I felt like I still was getting treated way worse than the guys, and there was a lot of people at the gym that saw the same kind of treatment, and for a while it was like emotionally abusive almost, and I haven't really talked too much publicly about it just because I wasn't sure if I wanted to address it publicly, but
Yeah.
it's been long enough that it's fine now. But yeah, I was definitely emotionally abused by my coach, my first set of coaches for a while, and it really affected me. It made me work so extremely hard that I almost ended up in the hospital with organ failure because I was overtraining so much and under eating, and they were telling me I wasn't working hard enough and I didn't want it bad enough, and like all sorts of things that were obviously not true, but at the time it really got in my head, and I felt like I needed to keep working harder and eating less. And at one point I was working out 8 times a day, and I ate less than 1,000 calories a day, and that's brutal. I don't recommend that anyone does that. And I was still not losing weight, and the reason why was because I ended up giving myself a lot of health issues, because your body can't sustain that long term. So for years I was severely under eating and severely overtraining.
And so you got help for that, right? Like you had to seek professional help for that. And were the
Yeah,
coaches ever, you know, sorry about that?
not really. So when I first came to my coaches with the thyroid issue that I had developed, my coach said to me, you just have to work harder and eat less, and you can overcome thyroid issues. And I'm like, that's not what the doctors are telling me at all. So I even had them go on a video chat with my current functional medicine doctor, who's the one who basically saved my life. And he was explaining to them all this stuff, and they didn't really, well, one of my coaches kind of got it and he backed off a little bit, but the other one definitely was stubborn and did not seem to want to change his mind. He just had that old school mentality, oh, you just have to push through it and work harder. It's not always the case, especially when science is telling you otherwise. So,
Yeah.
yeah, the doctor definitely helped me, and it took like 3 years to recover from that fully. So, yeah, it was pretty serious.
I can't imagine. I mean, what has really helped you trust your body and your own intuition after that?
I think that was like my wake-up call where I need to stop listening to other people because they might not have my best interest in mind and listen to my body, because my body was telling me to stop, and my body was telling me something was wrong for a couple years actually at that point. But I didn't listen to my body because I was listening to coaches who didn't really know what they were doing, especially as far as training a female fighter. I was their first female fighter. So maybe they learned from me. Hopefully they did. I don't train with them anymore, but I hope that they treat their other female fighters better than they did me. But I had to learn to like listen to every little thing my body was telling me, and I actually got really, really good at it. So now I know when something's wrong with me, and I know when I have to go to the doctor, and I don't let anyone else influence me. I'm like, nope, something is wrong, I promise. And then usually I'm pretty spot on with whatever is wrong because I've learned to listen to my body.
Yeah, and I know that must have taken some time too, especially when you have someone in your ear telling you something else. What made you stay with those coaches at the time? Was it just like not a lot of options, or it was, where you felt most comfortable?
Um, I'm extremely loyal, almost to a fault, and I was very loyal to them because, I mean, they at first what they were like, I looked up to them like older brothers kind of, and then I just I didn't really know what my other options were, and I was like, I almost didn't know any better, so I just kind of stayed there, and I was afraid to leave because I thought maybe it would be worse somewhere else.
Yeah.
And eventually, I got the courage to leave because it got that bad, and I also think as you get older, you kind of just learn to stand up for yourself a little bit more versus being 19, 20 years old, and you just trust whoever's in charge. And the more I grew into an actual adult, the more I was like, okay, I need to stand up for myself.
Yeah, you find your voice kind
Yeah.
of. I
Yeah.
I feel
Exactly.
like 25 and after, it's like, all right, this is what people are talking about. Like I can, things I can advocate for myself. So then you went on to do a TV show,
Mhm.
right? Like it was filmed. What was kind of the experience behind that? Like was it different with camera, or was it like reality TV, or kind of just, because they create a storyline around you?
Yeah, so being on the show, I compare it to like it was similar to basic training in the fact that like you're cut out from society. Like they take your phones, you don't have electronics, you don't have any communication with the outside world. They keep you completely like isolated together. So that was similar to me. It's felt very familiar to like basic training. A little bit weirder, like getting in front of a camera and being in front of a camera 24/7 and having a mic on you 24/7. It's just like
Yeah.
feels awkward like at first, but then you just like you get used to it and you just kind of ignore the fact that you're on camera. Um, the way that they edit things is not exactly accurate. They take things out of context. Like the things that they put on there, they weren't completely fake, but they made it more dramatic than it really was in real life. And so like every time a new episode would come out, I'd be like super nervous. I'm like, what did they make it look like today? So um, some of it was overly dramatic, and then other parts where they just filmed what actually happened, because there was some like stir craziness that happens when you isolate people for that long. Like I knew how to handle it because I was in the military, but no one else really knew what was happening, and I was like, you guys, this is totally normal. Like, you're getting stir crazy. It's not that serious, I promise. Just relax. And I remember one time there was a big fight between two of the people, like argument fight between two of the people because of the they let us watch the UFC fights, and there was a TV remote, and they were fighting over whether or not we could watch commercials, and they literally got into a big argument about it, and I'm like, guys, it is not that serious, and it's just because you're isolated and little things get on your nerves that normally wouldn't.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And so did you have a producer that was that
Yeah, there were several producers.
okay. And like when you have to film those kind of like in the moment where they're asking you questions, would they try to trick you or set you up to say anything?
Yeah.
I want to know
Yeah.
like what are some of the crazy things around that?
So they would like ask you questions that you knew were a trap. So for example, they'd be like, "Who's the worst fighter in the house?" And it's like I don't want to answer that question. And then I literally tried so hard, and they would not let me leave the room until I answered that question. So I'm like, come on, guys, like this is not fair. You're setting me up for failure here. And so I ended up like answering it reluctantly, but like they don't let you like avoid or skip questions like that. So they do things like that to like try to provoke you to say something so they can put it on TV and make it sound like you're trash talking when you really didn't want to trash talk at all, but they force you to.
Yes, yeah, I can totally see that. And did they withhold like, like meals, or you can't go to sleep until you answer this or anything like that?
No, it's not that extreme. It's just like they'll pull you up into, they had like a room upstairs where they did like the one-on-one interviews, and they'll pull you in there and they'll ask you questions, and like you have to answer them or they won't let you leave the room. So,
Real
but yeah, it's not all of the questions are like that, don't get me wrong, but some of them are definitely set up questions like that.
And I can see it. I can see it when watching reality TV or watching that, because you can tell, what's produced, what's not. I can tell that, but the average
Yeah,
viewer can't, and they really get sucked into it. But
yeah,
did you see other contestants kind of creating personas around themselves or
yeah.
acting different in front of the camera?
Yeah, definitely. You could tell, well, it's not that they were necessarily acting different around the camera. They just, like some of the people on there, like Maurice loved to drink, and then when he was drunk, he would be like this obnoxious person. And I feel like that's truly how he probably is when he's drinking, but he like got drunk a lot on the show, and so like his big personality came out a lot, and I think you wanted the extra camera attention because obviously when you're drunk and you're saying all sorts of crazy things, like the cameras are going to be pointed at you. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, you're gonna get that screen time. So would they like push drinks, or was that involved a lot?
They didn't push drinks. No, they allowed us to have alcohol. They definitely just like put the bar there and like let us eat and drink whatever we wanted. I found it weird that people were drinking on the show, I'm not gonna lie, because like I never drink during fight camp, like that's
Yeah.
not healthy. So like, but they were heavyweight guys, so like, I mean, to them, I guess it's probably they don't have to be as disciplined with their diet. I was like extremely disciplined with my diet in fight camp, so like I never ever drank. Like 3 months out from a fight, I would stop drinking and like eat super clean and like be very, very regimented with my diet. So to me, it was like shocking that other people were actually partaking in drinking because that's just something I never did.
No,
So
I didn't even
yeah,
think that, because I'm just thinking like you guys are supposed to be training, you're gonna be fighting.
yeah.
Wow. So what would be like the number one? What was like your best takeaway? What was the best experience around the show?
Um, I think getting through it and proving to myself that I could do the show and be successful by myself. Because you're basically by yourself. I didn't have my normal coaches. I didn't have anyone telling me what to eat or what to do, how to train. I worked out by myself. My coach wasn't really in like my coach on the show wasn't really involved in
Mm-hmm.
very well in our training and didn't really give us as intensive training as what I was used to. So I trained myself on my own, and I still did really well on the show, and I was the most disciplined one on the show. And that just made me think to myself, okay, I can do this and I can be successful by myself. I don't need my coaches that at the time that were a little bit verbally abusive. I didn't really need that. So that kind of gave me a little bit of a self-confidence boost. Like, okay, I can do this. I am disciplined enough. I want this bad enough. And it just proved to me how bad I wanted to be successful.
Mm-hmm. Yes, yeah, that's definitely very validating to know that you could go on. And did it ever like inspire you to want to do something else like that? Or were you like, that's it, I'm great, I did it, I don't know if I'd go back?
It's one of those things, kind of like boot camp, where you're proud of yourself that you did it, but you wouldn't want to do it again. It's definitely awkward to live in a house full of people that you're going to potentially fight. And so, like, that was probably the weirdest part for me. And because normally I don't like to even see or talk to my opponent or acknowledge their existence before a fight. And, like, then I was, like, living with them. So it was weird
It's
and
kind of a
an
mind.
uncomfortable experience.
Yeah, that's
Yeah, it's a mind, it messes with your mind, definitely.
yeah, no, because you don't want to psych yourself out, or if you're seeing them train and you're like, oh, they can do that. Yeah,
Yeah.
that would mess you.
Yeah.
And last question around that: do you look at TV differently at all now that you've been on it?
Yes. Anytime I see anything on a reality show and it's super dramatic, I'm like, huh, I wonder what really happened. Or I can usually tell what probably really happened and how they're making it look on TV. And I remember one specific episode. I accidentally walked into a room where my opponent was cutting weight and she was having a hard time cutting weight. And what really happened was I was having a conversation with another group of fighters and they were staying in the same room as Macy was. And so I was walking and talking with them, not really even thinking about where we were going. I was just following them into their room and talking. And then it was really hot in the room because Macy was cutting weight and I was not paying attention. And so I just took my the shirt I was wearing off because I was like it was really hot in there. And then Macy was in there cutting weight and I realized it. And as soon as I realized it, I was like, oh crap, I gotta go. So like I left and then I apologized to her. I'm like, I'm sorry, I did not mean to be disrespectful or anything like that. And we were cool, but on the TV show they did not show that part. They just showed me like taking my shirt off as if I was trying to flex on her or something. And I was just like, that's not real. I'm not that bad of a person, I promise. Like, I was like, oh man, here we go.
That is funny. They're making you look like the villain
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
the bully. That's funny. That is really funny. So now you're retired. You made the decision to retire. How's that been? Because you've been doing this pretty much your entire life. Are you still involved at some capacity?
I still train for fun. I haven't really been doing jujitsu, but I've been doing like kickboxing, like hitting pads and cardio kickboxing stuff that I really like to do for fun. It's a good way to work out and stay in shape. But I kind of got burned out on the sport completely just because I did so much for so long that I just kind of wanted to break from it. And I'm kind of ready for the next chapter of my life. So martial arts will definitely always be a part of who I am and part of my life. But as far as like competing and being competitive with it, I think I'm good with being done with that. It took a while for me to come to that decision. I didn't take it lightly. And I kind of went through a little bit of a crisis, like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? Who am I even now? And like, I had a sports psychologist that really, really helped me get through that part of my life. And so now I'm confident that I'm excited about the next chapter of my life, which is recruiting for the Air National Guard. I find that as like an awesome way for me to give back to the organization that really gave me so many opportunities to do so much with my life. So I'm really excited to be a recruiter now. And I mean, I'll always like cherish that part of my life, but it's just it's not for me anymore. And when you don't love the sport and your head's not in it, you definitely don't want to get into the ring anymore.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. It's just like, I can't imagine that. But that's interesting. A sports psychologist. So
hmm
are they kind of set up to, help, like prior athletes, or what is their main thing?
Their main thing is helping current and former athletes with their whatever they're struggling with. So for me, at first it was confidence issues and like anxiety and getting super
Mm-hmm.
stressed out and nervous before fights, and they gave me techniques to stay calm and like try to control that anxiety and make it not so crippling for me. And then obviously as I transitioned out of the sport, kind of helping me transition into regular life again. And then the sports psychologist for the UFC was a former Major League Baseball player, so he knew exactly what I was
Yeah.
going through. So talking with him really, really helped me because not very many people understand what it's like to get out of a sport that you did, like a major league sport, like be number one,
Mm-hmm.
the number one league, and like go back to like a regular life. Like it's quite a culture shock at first, and like not very many people understand it. So having someone that understands it and can explain it to you and like what to expect and like help you work through that, that was really important to me.
I'm seeing such a parallel here because you're saying like the culture shock, and so many veterans experience that when leaving the
Yes.
military, because you're leaving behind when you retire or you get out, you're leaving that all behind. So I think that's really going to help you up when you eventually do transition out, because yeah, I
Yeah.
can imagine that is tough. And also just kind of like you said, goal setting and what's next, because you're always preparing or you're training or getting ready for this.
Mhm.
And now maybe you're transforming that into what you're getting ready with your goals. And you mentioned recruiting, and I have a few questions about that. My first question is, did they select you because you already have a platform and they're like, she's a great role model, she's going to inspire so many people to join? Was there anything like that?
I don't know if that, I mean, that definitely helped me for sure. But I had an interview just like everyone else, and I interviewed really, really well. And I think that they liked how motivated I was and how inspired I was to do the job. And my work ethic kind of speaks for itself. Like anyone that's willing to work so hard that they become top 10 in the world at whatever they're doing, like obviously they have determination and work ethic. And I bring that same work ethic and attitude into anything that I do. So that's kind of what I focused on during my interview, was talking about that and how passionate I am about helping the Air National Guard get the next generation of people in. So I think they saw that passion and that drive, and I think that's why they selected me. And then having a platform already kind of was just an added bonus to that.
Cherry on top.
Yeah,
So you wanted to go into recruiting?
yeah,
You
I
you
did.
applied for it. Okay. Okay.
Yes.
I was just curious. I had to ask.
Yeah.
And also recruiting, it's been in the news. It's at an all-time low right now. They're really
Yep.
hurting to find people that are eligible and find people that are willing. How are you seeing that? Is that something that you're dealing with right now?
Well, since I just started, I don't know exactly how difficult it's going to be. However, just in the past couple weeks that I've seen the response that we get at high schools and things, there seems to be either a lack of like knowledge about the Air National Guard itself, or
Mm-hmm.
a lack of understanding of what we do, because some people are uninformed. They think everyone in the military is on the front lines and shooting and killing people, and like you kind of have to explain what the military really is, and like that there's different jobs and you can do whatever, like there's a military equivalent for pretty much every civilian job. So like they don't really understand that, and they don't really understand what the Air National Guard is or does, or that we even exist sometimes. So like trying to explain, like just giving them information about it, I think will help, spreading awareness about it. And then also it is really hard just because there are a lot of health issues now, and then there's the mental health crisis in this country, and like so getting into the military is it's going to be a challenge for certain people depending on what their medical background is. So even if they want to serve, are they eligible to? That's the next question.
Yeah, yeah, that's so true. And I know they're kind of relooking at those requirements that they have to have, because you can't have ever been prescribed certain medication, even in your youth, and a lot of people don't know what's ahead in their future. But another thing that you mentioned was kind of the media in Hollywood doesn't really help us out with
No.
what they portray as someone in the military as. They're not showing stories like you and I. And that's why I think it's so awesome for you to have your platform and to, be vocal about being a veteran, being serving, and we're kind of coming up on time here. So I just wanted to know what would be your best advice for women out there who either want to get into mixed martial arts or women who want to get into the military?
I would say if you want to get into martial arts, find like Google, do some research on local gyms that are around your area, and then try a bunch of different ones. Most of them have free trials, so go in, try it. If you like it, join it, do it, because I promise you, you won't regret it. If the vibe doesn't feel right, don't feel obligated to join that gym. Shop around, see what else is out there. Go to some other free trials. If the vibe isn't right, listen to your instincts and go somewhere that you feel comfortable. And then as far as joining the military, I would just Google the local Air National Guard, or if you want to join the active duty, call your local recruiter and just talk. There's no obligation when you just talk to them, and they're going to want to get your information so that they can contact you, but that doesn't mean that you're signing up that day. Like, it's a long process. It takes like several months, sometimes almost a year to actually enlist. So just making that call, it's not as scary as you think, and you're not making any commitments. So just call your local recruiter and talk to them and ask all the questions that you can possibly think of.
Yeah, that's so true. Sometimes when you think you're about to make that call or send that email, you're already signing your life away.
Yeah. Yeah, I
But
see that hesitation when we ask for information. It's like, no, we're not like committing you to anything, I promise. We're just gonna like have a conversation and talk about what your goals are and what you want, and like just make sure that you know what you're signing up for when you talk to your recruiter, and make sure that they answer all your questions. And if they don't, feel free to DM me on Instagram, and I'll try to answer your questions the best I can.
awesome. So is that the best place to reach you, on Instagram, or where else can people reach you?
Um, I am on Facebook as well, facebook.com/LeahNitis MMA, and then on Instagram you can DM me as well. So either platform, I'm always on social media, so just send me a message and I'll get back to you as soon as I can.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, thank you, Leah, so much for joining me tonight and for inspiring so many people with this conversation. I had a blast with you. I hope you did too.
Yes.
And thank you everyone for joining and stopping by the live and saying hi. Or if you're watching the replay, I hope you enjoyed this. So, all
Thank
right. Well,
you.
bye, Leah. I hope you have a great week.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.